Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of the Contrarian. I am just delighted to have with me Senator Tim Kaine from the great Commonwealth of Virginia, my former senator. I live in the district now. Senator, welcome.
Jen, I'll be your temporary senator until you get one.
Until we can get the franchise back, you better believe it. So I want to start off talking about the economic news today. Trump has been in office just since January, and we now have a contraction in the economy of 0.3%, which, as I understand, is the biggest, quickest decline in the economy since 1947.
It is, look, Donald Trump on Inauguration Day inherited the strongest economy in the world. Not a perfect economy, but a very strong one, strong growth, manufacturing up, infrastructure up, really the envy of other industrialized nations. And in 100 days of chainsaw wielding chaos between massive unstrategic layoffs of federal employees, massive cuts to all kinds of programs, and then especially this tariff chaos. I announce, then I pause, then I may make an exception for you or give you a waiver, and then I announce a new different set of tariffs. I traveled around Virginia last week, Jen, and what I heard again and again was, listen, there's so much chaos now that I have an investment I want to make to expand my business, but I'm not going to make an investment until the dust settles and I know what the rules of the road are and that they're not going to change tomorrow. So the chaotic behavior, which sometimes can work well, like in a one-on-one negotiation, being a little unpredictable can work well. It's horrible when it comes to the American economy. So he's turned this strong economy into one with flashing red lights and question marks all over it.
We took action on the tariffs. Tell us about that.
So the president has imposed these tariffs pursuant to a statute called IEEPA that's an emergency statute that was designed to be used in wartime against adversary nations. And only President Trump has used this statute against allies, and only President Trump has used it to impose tariffs because IEEPA allows presidents to take certain actions, but tariffs are not mentioned at all in the statute, which is the subject of some litigation that's going on. So I challenged President Trump's declaration of an emergency leading to the Canada tariffs. And about a month ago, I got a vote in the Senate. And for the first time during this Trump term, too, enough Republicans joined with Democrats to say, hey, that's a bad idea. We want you to stop. We haven't gotten the bill through the House. That's a tougher sell, but we're still working on it. But now I have also filed with a number of other senators a challenge to President Trump's global tariff regime, which I think is economic idiocy for about 5 reasons. And we're going to have a vote about that later today. And I have some, feeling of optimism, if not complete confidence, but optimism that I'm also going to get enough Republican votes today to essentially deliver a Senate rebuke of President Trump's use of these global tariffs, which are essentially a national sales tax imposed on the say-so of one person.
And just to underscore, Congress in the Constitution has this power. It was only because they delegated it in a very narrow set of circumstances that Trump has been able to do this. What are your Republican colleagues saying? They must be talking to their constituents. Are they seeing this sort of chaos and paralysis that you're seeing in Virginia?
Yeah, Jen, and you're right. The Constitution clearly gives trade to the Article 1 branch. It was only really after World War II that 535 members of Congress said in some narrow circumstances it might be easier for the president to act than to get the consensus of the Article 1 branch. But President Trump is using this IEEPA statute, which says nothing about tariffs, in a completely unprecedented way. And again, I hope we can succeed against him in the Senate or in courts. But yeah, your question is, well, what are my colleagues hearing? My colleagues are hearing the same thing I'm hearing, that tariffs are a sales tax that increase people's prices for everyday goods, groceries, clothes, building supplies, farmers. The cost of fertilizer goes up because potash in agricultural fertilizer comes from Canada. So to start with, it's a sales tax. Second, there's never been a one-sided trade war in the history of mankind. So as soon as President Trump puts on tariffs, nations have to retaliate. Those retaliatory tariffs tend to be aimed at parts of the American economy that are very sensitive. So agriculture and forestry get hit really, really hard, and they are being hit very hard. And then the third thing, because you're such a sort of national security focused person in your work, it makes it really hard for your national security partners that you want to partner with in defense matters to work with you when you're screwing up their economy. I'll give you an example. Germany has just chosen a new government. The new chancellor will be put in place next week. A chancellor who might be the most pro-transatlantic chancellor in some time. But the new government was elected off an economic mandate. You've got to get the German economy out of the doldrums where it's been for the last 5 years. I was in Germany 2 weeks back on an armed services visit, and everything I was hearing from the Germans is, we're working with you militarily. You have more U.S. troops in Germany than any nation other than Japan outside the U.S. We're working together on Ukraine. We're helping you build the F-35s and we're buying them. But we can't keep being such a great partner if you're putting tariffs on Germany in a way that is getting just a direct obstacle to our new chancellor achieving what he told German voters he was going to achieve if they put his coalition in power. So this tariff regime is very, very bad. My colleagues are hearing it. And I do think there's sort of a growing sense of unease, and certainly today's GDP contraction will only add to that growing unease.
Yes, to your point, it's not easy to get the Canadians very angry with the United States, but this president has managed to do something. I want to talk to you as we reach the end of our time briefly, talking about the international realm. The president was confronted in an interview with the question, can't you just pick up the phone and get Gilmore Abrego Garcia, this gentleman who was mistakenly sent to El Salvador, back? And he said something along the lines, I could if I wanted to, and then insisted that a Photoshop picture of the gentleman's knuckles that showed MS-13 on it was actually real. What did you make of that entire transaction? And are you concerned that the president is frankly not operating in the real world?
I am concerned about that. And Jen, this is the constitutional crisis, the beginning of it. A president not willing to follow the rule of law as laid down by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in a 7-2 decision, said, you've admitted that you mistakenly deported this guy. You must facilitate his return. Now, the Supreme Court used that somewhat of a wiggle room. They didn't say you've got to bring him back. They said you have to facilitate it. But it's clear that President Trump could do it, and it's clear that President Bukele could do it. And one thing I think it's really important to point out is the President Bukele may think this is a fun attention grab, while with President Trump, who's now going to be president for another 3 years, the relationship between the United States and El Salvador is going to go on forever. And it will be deeply poisoned by an El Salvadoran president violating the human rights and the rule of law of Americans, flouting the will of the United States Supreme Court. Seems like a cute stunt now, but this is going to work to the detriment of El Salvador and the El Salvadoran population if President Bukele keeps thinking he can flout American law. We are looking at strategies. Certainly the president making that claim, of course I could, but I'm not going to. That will end up being evidence in the district court, which is trying to decide whether the White House has taken steps to facilitate the return. There's a phrase in law, an admission against interest. What President Trump just did was a direct admission against interest that will be admissible evidence in the district court proceeding. So more might happen there, but I'm also going to say stay tuned for congressional action on this, likely soon.
Well, that is the most promising thing we've heard in a while, and I wish you the best of luck both on the tariff front and on this front. It's good to see that Democrats are alive and kicking and pushing back. So thank you so much for being with us, Senator. We'll look forward to having you back.
I'd love to, Jen. Thanks so much.
Thank you.